probably have my notes ready. What's up, friends? So, elephant in the room. I got bangs. I think they look good. Yes? Yes? You don't have to tell me. I know they do. Thank you. So we're going to do a reading wrap up. This is going to be for January and February because I completely forgot. Not forgot. I meant to do it in January, but by the time I did set aside the time, it was already like the 8th when I could film, and then it would be uploaded in the middle of the month, so I just felt a little silly doing that. So we're just going to combine both of these months, and then hopefully going forward I can be better. So we're just going to get into it because I have 2 months worth of books, and that equals out to 20 books. I did 10 books January, 10 books in February. I'm really proud of myself. That's probably the most I've started off the year with in a really long time. So we're just gonna get right to it because I have a lot of thoughts and opinions, and you know your girl likes to yap. So first, the first 2 books that I finished in January was The Battle of the Labyrinth and The Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. I started my Percy Jackson reread basically this time last year, so I had gone through The Lightning Thief all the way to The Titan's Curse, and then for whatever reason I just did not continue with these 2. And when I was reading these 2, I realized I remember the overall story of both of them, obviously because major things happen in both of these books that are memorable, but I do not remember a lot of the like details. And even though these 2 books are definitely going to be a couple of years before we see them in the Percy Jackson TV show, I wanted to just, you know, reread the entire series to get, so it could be fresh on my mind. I gave Battle of the Labyrinth 4 stars, and then I gave The Last Olympian 5 stars. It's Percy Jackson, okay? Yeah, I'm gonna give them 5 stars. I read Normal People by Sally Rooney. I gave this 4 stars, and I read this because I had started the show on Hulu because it had Daisy Edgar-Jones in it and Paul Mescal, and I like both of those actors. And I got through, I think, the first 3 episodes before I stopped and was like, I think I would enjoy this a lot better if I knew what was happening. I did not purchase this book for that reason though. I only got this because my local Barnes & Noble does little mystery book bags, a little dice roll game, and if there's something about me is I cannot say no to a good little mystery bag. It got me. And luckily it was Normal People, and it was something that, although I would have bought it eventually, I would not have bought it for myself like that day. So I am glad that I ended up getting that blind bag. I really liked the characters of Marianne and Connell, and I know some people, I was reading through the reviews on Goodreads, some people don't like this. Did I say what, sir? I gave this a 4 stars. I know some people don't like this because the characters are kind of pretentious, and it is like mainly all set in like an academic setting, but for me, I like that they were pretentious. I know that if I knew these people in real life, they would be insufferable. But something about reading about their lives and their relationship and being like an outsider to it all, I don't hate them. If I knew them in real life, I probably would hate them. So I understand how this is not for everyone. And then another criticism I read on Goodreads and like TikTok overall was the lack of quotation marks. That wasn't a deterrent to me. I only a handful of times got confused on who was speaking and when it changed from actual dialogue to like inner thoughts. But overall, I really enjoyed it. This is my first Sally Rooney book, and I do think I'm going to follow up and read some of her other works. This is my Kindle. Read The Housemaid by Freida McFadden on Kindle Unlimited. I gave it 2 stars. I know, okay. So I read it because it's The Maid by Freida McFadden. Everybody talks about this book, and I wanted in on it, okay? I went into it knowing that I probably wasn't gonna like it because just from what I've heard on like TikTok about her writing, it doesn't seem to align with what I would typically enjoy, but I do enjoy thrillers, so I wanted to give it a chance, especially because The Housemaid is going to be made into a movie, so I did want to know what was going on before, going into the movie, because I will be watching it. My main criticism is that it feels like a direct ripoff of The Last Mrs. Parrish. And that book came out in like 2017, and The Housemaid came out in like 2022, I think is what it was. So for that reason, I automatically was like, it's getting a lower rating, because it just felt way too similar in terms of the plot. It just felt too much like The Last Mrs. Parrish. The only difference in the reason it got a 2 stars versus The Last Mrs. Parrish, which I did very much enjoy. I think I gave it like 4 stars when I read it originally a couple years ago. The only reason that it bumped up in star ratings was because I felt like The Last Mrs. Parrish, the twist at the end, the character of like her husband was very, what he did, like the violence and the abuses that he like committed against his wife in The Last Mrs. Parrish was really terrible. And in The Housemaid was bad, obviously, he's abusive, but not so horrific in the way that the husband in The Last Mrs. Parrish was. So for that reason, I did give it a slightly higher rating than I probably originally would have, just because I felt like it dealt with the abuse a little bit better and not just fully dived into like, this is horrific. Not only, in my opinion, did it rip off The Last Mrs. Parrish, it also ripped off in terms of the solution, or not the solution, but like the end climax resolution of it all. Also ripped off Behind Closed Doors by P.A. Parrish, which again I did read a couple years ago, and I very much enjoyed that book. I think, again, I gave that one 4 stars. I enjoyed it very much. In The Housemaid, Minnie, the abuse that she suffers at the hands of the husband, he locks her in, and he did this to his wife too, Nina, locks them in a room for various different things that he believes that they did wrong. Millie locks him into the house, is able to escape, locks him in instead, and very gruesomely gives him pliers and has him pull all his teeth out, and then that's how he ends up dying. And that is almost exactly what happened in Behind Closed Doors. She ended up being able to lock him in the basement and then leave, go on vacation, as to not incriminate herself. I mean, it looked like he locked himself in the basement, and it worked in Behind Closed Doors. It did not work in The Housemaid because he pulled his teeth out. No one in their right mind is pulling out their own teeth, obviously. No proper detective would just see that and let it go. You can have me ignore a lot of things in books to just let the story be the story. I couldn't ignore this. That is too much. That's crazy. No one's doing that. Next, I read Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. I loved this. I gave it 5 stars. Second 5-star of the year. Listen, some people might say that this is overhyped on TikTok. This, the Shepherd duology, so One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. I cannot disagree more. I loved both of them, and it did not disappoint. I loved it. I really enjoyed, and I know some people mayhaps not have enjoyed, Elm and Ion. I'm not good at pronunciation, okay? If I didn't listen to it in an audiobook, I don't know how you say it. I loved their relationship. I think it could have been built up better. I felt like it was a little bit fast, but I can let that go because they were technically stuck together at all times of the day for the duration, like the entirety of this book. So I can let it go. I, did want more Elspeth and Raven, obviously. I loved their relationship in the first book. I loved the slow burn of it, the yearning. I loved everything about them in the first book, so I wanted more in this book, but obviously, because of circumstances, I could not get more. But I did love seeing what Nightmare was able to do when given complete and total control. So that was great. I loved, again, the magic system continued to be the amazing magic system that was built up in the first one. I think this book, like, this duology works really well as a duology. I think if tried to stretch it out into like a longer series, it might not have worked as well. But I really enjoyed this. I was, the last like probably 200 pages, 150 pages, I was set. I needed to know what was happening. I was turning these pages so fast. I love this book. Next, onto a book I did not enjoy as much, or arguably at all. This is The Couple Next Door by Shari LaPena. I gave this 2 stars, which arguably, now that I'm thinking about it, might be too nice. I may be too nice and not like to give out 1 stars. I did not enjoy this. I believe the only reason I decided to pick this up is, 1, it has been on my bookshelf for probably 2 years, maybe more. But I think I saw somewhere online that this was being made into a movie. So I decided, it's going to be made into a movie, I want to know what's going to happen. Again, that's definitely one way to get me to read a book, if it's been on my TBR for too long. I can see how they're going to make this into a movie. I could definitely see why it would be a movie versus a like Netflix series, because there is not anything that happens in this book. The entire plot of this is that the couple, our main couple characters, have a newborn baby. She's like 5 months old. They leave her in her crib to go next door to their neighbor's birthday dinner party. And while they are gone, when they come back home, the baby has disappeared. That is the entire plot. That happens all in the first chapter. But it just, from the first chapter, I knew exactly how this was going to end. I knew who took the baby. I knew why they took the baby. It was just too predictable, and I was hoping that there would be a twist in the end, and arguably there was, but not a twist that was worth anything. So I was hoping it would be, it was predictable, but I was still hoping that it would do something different to make me be shocked at the end, you know? Like, I read a lot of thrillers, I read a lot of mysteries, so I can, you know, it's very easy to pick up on those tropes and kind of see where something is going, which isn't bad. Every genre has tropes, every genre has their stereotypes. It's the way that you play into them that's going to make the difference on whether it was done well or not and actually make it enjoyable. And this book did not make any of it enjoyable. It just had points and tropes that it wanted to hit, and it did those and then did nothing with them. And it was just disappointing. I would not recommend this. Maybe if it is actually becoming a movie and you want to know what's going to happen, but I'm sure when you see the trailer, everything will be in the trailer. I can guarantee that. There is nothing that happens in this book that is worth knowing. I read Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. It was a 3.5 stars, and this is just what I was talking about. This is one of those instances where it was predictable, but the author had fun with it, therefore I enjoyed it. So the plot of Dead of Winter is basically just our main character is going on a romantic weekend getaway with her boyfriend. She hopes that he's going to propose. They're on a bus with, I think, at most 10 other people. Don't remember exactly how many other characters there were, but it's a very small number. It's like an off-season or about to be off-season, so there's not a lot of people going to this ski resort. On the way there, their bus breaks down and everyone has to get out, and a blizzard comes in. They end up all staying in a cabin that they happened upon and are all starting to die one at a time. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I knew kind of where the story was going. It kind of, spoilers but not really to compare it to, kind of was like the Murder on the Orient Express. So if you know what happens there, it's the same thing essentially, but like reversed, if that makes a little sense. I really enjoyed it. When I read it, it was really cold, and like it was a really cold part of January, so like the atmosphere of it was very like, it was cold. They were stuck on a mountain. I was cold, stuck in my house, so not exactly the same, but it was really fun and I did enjoy it. And this is my second Darcy Coates book, and it was an audiobook, but I was tuned in. If it was a real book, I'd be flipping those pages trying to figure out what's gonna happen next, because it was just very well paced, where things were happening, a chapter would end, but there was still like, I want to know what's going to happen next. So I very much enjoyed it. After that, I read Onyx Storm, which I did a video on, so if you want my full thoughts, it's going to be there, so I'm not going to yap too much about that. But Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, I gave it 3 stars. I read Powerless in January, and then in February I read Reckless, so I'm just going to talk about both of them together since they're part of a series. And I had vastly different experiences with both of these. So Powerless by Lauren Roberts, I loved. I gave 4 stars. I enjoyed it so much. I listened to the audiobook for both of these. I really enjoyed Powerless. I had a lot of fun with it. I know I think I've seen criticisms about like the writing, but I liked it. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the romance of it and the love triangle, and to me that is mainly what this book was. I know that the games, I did enjoy those, but I enjoyed everything else so much more. I loved the romance and the relationships that she built up with other characters, and I left it feeling pretty excited for what the next book was going to come. I liked the aspect of the revolution, or not the revolution, but like the resistance that was being built, and like the political aspects of it. So I enjoyed that, which I feel like not too many people do enjoy when they talk about it online. So I was confused on why not that many people seem to enjoy Powerless. And then I read Reckless, and that was, I don't know what happened there. I gave Reckless 2 stars. So it tonally felt different. I feel like nothing happened. I'm still not sure what happened. From where we left off in Powerless to where we start with Reckless is only a 3-day difference. And I think my main problem with Reckless is that everyone was completely incompetent at their job. I understand that Kai's job was to find Peyton and bring her back, and that he didn't really want to do that because he loves her. But still, you're so bad at your job. There's so much back and forth between Peyton being free and going to do whatever it is that she's going to do, and Peyton getting caught and going to get taken back to the castle, for all of it to ultimately just not really matter because they still ended up going back to the castle. What is happening? I did not enjoy Reckless, but because I liked Powerless so much, and I do think that where Reckless stopped, where it ended and how it ended, it was interesting enough that I will most likely read the 3rd book when it comes out later this year. I just am a little scared now because what happened. But I'm going to assume that it's going to be good, because the part that I most enjoyed out of Powerless was the romance and kind of the weird, not love triangle, because that wasn't really established yet. She was kind of just having flirty conversations with both of the brothers. That was the best aspect of that book for me. So I'm going to assume that this 3rd book is going to be just more of that. So I'm going to give it a chance. I read Caraval and Legendary by Stephanie Garber. I gave Caraval a 3 stars, and I gave Legendary a 3.5 stars. I read this series off of a recommendation of a friend. It is her favorite series of all time. I decided to give Caraval a chance. I am underwhelmed, and maybe it's just because she hyped it up a lot, so my expectations were high. I enjoyed both of the books. I enjoyed what Caraval is, like the whole game aspect of it all, and I do enjoy each of the sisters' characters individually. For Caraval, I felt a little confused, and I felt like it also took a really long time to get to like the magical aspect of it, so I was a little disappointed in that. I wanted it to kind of just start off being magical, so I did enjoy Legendary more because of that. But just following Scarlet's like story throughout Caraval was confusing, just because I assume because she's confused, so we are understanding from her perspective. So I didn't enjoy that too much, and then the ending I just felt like happened really fast. And there was just a lot of everyone deceiving her at one time and then being like, just kidding, none of it was real, this is actually what's been happening. But overall I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed Legendary more because I feel like following Donatella's story was simpler, just for the fact that I already have an idea of what Caraval is and who the characters are and what the point of Caraval is for. So following that like storyline was a lot easier for me, and I enjoyed it. Overall, I just feel like the writing just isn't for me, a little lackluster than I would like, but I did like the magic. So now we're on to books I read in February, minus those series books since I already talked about them. So two things for going into February to understand my mindset. One, I got a library card at my local library, and in addition to that, I now am on Libby, and I went a little crazy. So I don't have any physical copies of any of the books I will talk about, minus one that I had already owned. So there's that. Two, obviously February is Black History Month, and I wanted to try and read more Black authors, and read a couple of different genres, but mainly I still stuck to the genres that I normally read. Anyways, Middle of the Night by Riley Sager, I gave it 4 stars. It is the second Riley Sager book that I've read, and you know, he's a pretty well-known author, especially in the like thriller mystery genre, so I wanted to give that a go, and then it was on Libby, so yes. The plot is you follow the main character whose best friend went missing in childhood while they were having a fun sleepover in their tent overnight at his house, and he's kind of dealt with this for the past 30 years, and now he is living back in his childhood home, and the ghosts of his past come back to haunt him in more ways than one. I really enjoyed this mainly because it had the paranormal aspect of it alongside the unresolved like kidnapping that happened to him in childhood. So I really liked that they kind of played with, is he being haunted? Like, obviously he's being haunted by what happened to his best friend in childhood, but is he genuinely being haunted? Because you are led to believe that he is. Along with him being potentially actually haunted, you get a lot of talk on, you know, the afterlife, and is there something after you die. So I really did enjoy that aspect. The actual, not plot twist, but I guess reveal of what happened to his best friend when he was a kid was a little underwhelming, but I also feel like it was very realistic, because not everything has to be crazy in these thriller mysteries and over the top. So little underwhelming in terms of what actually happened, because it has this paranormal aspect to it, you do want it to be something kind of fantastical and crazy. So it wasn't that, but I do think it was realistic and also still very sad and unfortunate for, you know, the community that was affected by this. So I did enjoy that. Next, I read Notes on an Execution by Danya Korkofta. I gave it 3 stars. It follows a prisoner who is on death row, and it follows him throughout his last day while also going in between different timelines and POVs. One for his mother, one for the sister of one of his victims, and then one for the police detective who ended up solving these murders that he is on death row for. Didn't enjoy so much the main, who was supposed to be the main character, the man on death row. I didn't enjoy his POVs because you just follow him basically starting, I believe, 12 hours before his execution time, and just kind of his thought process and his some not totally, some reflection on the crimes that he committed and some insight into why. I think following the other perspectives was a lot more interesting. His mother's perspective, which you only get a handful of because it was really just to establish, you know, his early life and give insight onto maybe why he is the way that he is and why he committed these crimes. I thought that perspective was very interesting. But you mainly really follow the detective in the story because she, it turns out, having a prior connection to him before she became a police officer. So I think that was really interesting and a really nice like little tie-in into his past. It felt like it was trying to make a statement on how inhumane death row is or isn't, just like the flaws in the judicial system as a whole, and how a lot of prisoners on death row are there when they shouldn't be. The main character, the killer on death row, is white. He's a white man, but he does make it a point in the book to point out that a lot of the prisoners on death row are obviously disproportionately black and brown men to be on death row. So I do feel like it tried to make that point, but not well, in my opinion, because it's tackled these systemic issues, but it never really harped on it. It kind of just, you know, would throw in a sentence here or two, or throw in like a paragraph about an experience, like with the detective, for example, because she is a woman, and her experience, you know, being a woman in a male-dominated field. And it kind of just threw these sentences out so that you as the reader could think about them, but never really went into any real details or thoughts into them. So I kind of wish it would have done a little bit more of that. Overall, it was a good book. I don't know if I would recommend it. It's not for everyone, but I wanted to just give it a try. 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, and I gave that 4 stars. I normally don't really gravitate towards romance, but this was one of the most recommended books, books in general, during the beginning of the month when, you know, people are recommending books by black authors. So even though I don't really enjoy romance, I decided to give it a try, and I ended up very pleasantly surprised with it, especially because it is a second chance romance trope, and that is kind of like a hit or miss for me personally, but I really enjoyed it. I really loved her writing. I think she's a great writer, and she was really able to kind of like put me into the perspective of these characters and kind of see where they are coming from. And I do, because it's second chance romance, I really enjoyed that she was able to like really hone in on why these characters were so enamored with each other like in the past, and why that's still affecting them in the present. So I really enjoyed that. And also I think it's really funny that they're both authors who have been writing about each other for 15 years at this point. That's romantic, okay? I don't care what anyone says. So I really enjoyed it, and I also enjoyed, because my main problem with romance is that sometimes they just get real crazy and unbelievable in the ending of it all, like how they get to their happily ever after. So I do enjoy that at the end of this, because there is a third act breakup like there always is. So I do enjoy that it gave more of a realistic reconciliation to that third act breakup versus what you normally get in romance. Were there still aspects that were like over the top and like that wouldn't happen in real life? Of course. But that's why we read romance, because there are aspects to it that are over the top and would never happen in real life, but you like to read about it. So I did very much enjoy that. I was pleasantly surprised. Was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oinka Braithwaite, and I know I butchered that, and I listened I listened to it so many times to try and get that right, but my mouth cannot say it. I read this because I like thrillers, I like mysteries, and it has been something that I've seen on the internet for a couple of years now. Because of Libby, I decided to just do the audiobook. It was only 4 hours, so took this as an opportunity to go. And I am so disappointed to say that I gave this book a 2.5 stars. I did not enjoy it as much as I was hoping I would, which is very disappointing because I really thought I was going to, because it has caught my eye for so many years now, and online it has so many recommendations. So many people recommend this book and love it, and it was just it's not for me. There definitely are aspects that I can see why people liked it. I can see why people enjoy it. I get it, but I just did not like it. I think the main issue was it was not what I was expecting. I, by the title, thought that the sister was going to be a serial killer and I would be actively following along as she is killing. This is a story that centers around Corday and her sister, who is a serial killer. She has killed, at the beginning of this book, she has killed now 3 of her boyfriends, and her sister Corday is the one who goes and helps her clean it up and, keeps a secret for her. So, based off of the title of the book and how it immediately starts with Corday going and helping her sister after she's just murdered her most recent boyfriend, I thought that that's what this book was going to be. It was just following them and following her along as she's cleaning up after her sister, which she does do, but it's more she is trying to prevent her sister from, now having her next victim who is someone that Corday is interested in. So it was good. I did enjoy it. It was a lot of reflection on their relationship with their family, and kind of just you're loyal, do you stay loyal to your family even when they aren't making the best decisions and decisions you yourself do not agree with. I did enjoy that aspect of it, but just overall I thought it was going to be something that it wasn't, and even though what it did turn out to be was good, it just wasn't for me. So I'm personally disappointed that I didn't enjoy it. I really wanted to. I read When the Reckoning Comes by LaTonya McQueen, and I ended up giving it a 4 stars. This is a book that I did actually enjoy. It's right up my alley. The story follows our main character going back home to a plantation wedding and kind of having to deal with the ghosts of her past and actual ghosts. I really enjoyed it because it very much leaned into the gothic horror aspect of it all, and I really enjoyed that. I really loved the ghost aspect of it all, and it is truly horrific how easily people want to erase history that makes them uncomfortable and just kind of glamorize it and very much downplay the atrocities that were committed. Obviously this happens in real life. There are still plantations in the South that do get turned into things like wedding venues that people use. So I really enjoyed the aspect of the ghost, trying to communicate with the main character and kind of, because the entire story, the characters live in this area where this plantation is and have heard that it is haunted, but no one ever truly knew what happened to the plantation when it was active, and obviously no one knows if it is truly haunted. They're all just rumors. When she comes back for this wedding, you see that the ghosts are trying to interact with her to show her what truly happened on this plantation and kind of be able to tell their story in a way. So I really enjoyed that. So next I read Model Home by Rivers Solomon, and I gave that one 4 stars as well. I really enjoyed it. Again, it was another book where it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. I thought that this was going to be more of an actual haunted house story, and it ended up not being that so much. You know, the ghosts and the haunted house ended up being a lot more metaphorical. It was just so beautifully written and so well done that I just had to give it 4 stars, even though it was another book that it wasn't what I was expecting. It was so sad, obviously, what the main character goes through, like what ends up being the ghost in the end, and kind of just, it is a book about, you know, repressed trauma. You know, it is this, you know, successful black family moves into a completely white neighborhood, and they are the only black family, and then kind of you end up learning that the ghosts and the things that they dealt with was because of these white neighbors. So it is tragic in that way that they had to deal with this, and so much so that the main character repressed so much of it in themselves. But it was just beautifully written, and it was just such a hard read, but it was so worth it in the end. These last 2 books are so hard to like talk about, because they are just, it's so horrible with what happened, but it's just like such good writing that it's like, they're just good books. So 4 stars on that. And then I read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, and I ended up giving that 5 stars, so my 3rd 5-star of the year so far. This is a historical fiction about 2 sisters who are living in Nazi-occupied France during World War II. I gave it 5 stars, but honestly, thinking back and reflecting on it now to give this review, it might be more of a 4.5. Because it is crazy that she was trying to make me sympathize, or I don't know, maybe if she was, but trying to make me sympathize and feel bad for a Nazi. I felt very frustrated with the character of Vianne, because I wanted her to do more. I wanted her to be more like her sister Isabel, who, you know, refused to just bend down to these Nazis and refused to just lie down and take it. But I do realize that it is important to see that both of these characters were what people were having to make the decision on, whether they were going to stand up for something they knew was right, or if they were going to try and just get through it, because the reality is some people can only just get through it. And overall, it was horrific to read about. It was very sad. There were so many things that happened. Because I previously read a Kristen Hanna book, I knew that I was in for kind of a tearjerker. I kind of knew someone was gonna die at the end. I had my suspicions on who it was, so it wasn't super, like, I've seen so many videos of people crying at the end of this, but I didn't, because I kind of figured what was gonna happen. But overall, I enjoyed it. I don't really read historical fiction, so this is the only way that I'm going to. Is Know My Name by Chanel Miller, and I gave that 4 stars. Now, this is a non-fiction book. I would highly recommend checking trigger warnings before you delve into this one, because it was hard to get through. I listened to this on Libby, so I did not have the physical book, but I listened to the audiobook, and Chanel is the one who narrates it herself, so it was an experience to get her to hear her tell her own story with her own words. So if you don't know who Chanel Miller is, she is the victim in the Stanford rapist trial, the Brock Turner trial, and this is her telling her own story. She talks about more than just what happened to her on that night. She talks about, you know, having to deal with being catcalled or potentially followed, and just the fear that women have just living our everyday lives. So for it was very relatable because we've all felt that. It was hard to listen to her describe, you know, the assault and going through the process of going through getting her justice for it. It was especially hard to hear her talk about the opinions of others on what happened to her and her experience. Because this is something that could happen to any woman, or has happened to almost every woman, it is hard to hear the just comments and opinions of others that they had on her, and whether it was her fault or not, which it was not. So it was very hard to hear. And it was also at the end, she read her character statement that she read in court, and then was released on BuzzFeed for the public. And it is very long, but very good. If you haven't read it, I would recommend reading it. But because it was in the audiobook, she read it herself, and that was very hard to listen to, because there were moments where you could hear in the recording that she was getting emotional and, you know, tearing up, just having to read these words and kind of relive all of this to tell us this story. So it was very good. I would highly recommend everyone read, but it is not for everyone, because it could be very triggering if you've ever dealt with sexual assault or harassment or anything like that. So I would definitely check the trigger warnings to see if it's something you can handle. But it was just a very powerful book, and I was so glad that she's able to kind of take back her power and make a name for herself as more than just Brock Turner's victim. She is now a author of a children's book. I checked up on her Instagram, so she is doing that. So I am very glad to see that she's doing well for herself, and that she is more than just what happened to her. That's everything that I read in January and February. The last couple of books were all very heavy topics, so I'm going to try and read a lot more lighthearted and fun books for March, because I need it. But that's everything that I read in the past 2 months. So I hope you enjoyed my thoughts and opinions. Please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments, so we can have a discussion. And if there's any books that you think I should read based on my likes and dislikes in this video, please let me know below, because I have an ever-growing TBR, so why not add to it?